everybody. Welcome to Cancer Book Club. This month we have an incredible book called The Healing Circle by Rob Rutledge and Timothy Walker. It is an amazing compilation of stories of individuals as well as their extensive work in reaching out throughout Canada and even into the US with decades of experience in terms of the oncology world. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much, Pat. It's just wonderful to be here and have this great opportunity. And I'm also super happy to be with my friend again, Dr. Timothy Walker.
Welcome, everybody.
Tell me,
Hello.
Robin, excellent. Hi. Robin, do you want to try to lead off with some questions?
Well, I'm curious for you to tell us about the impetus behind writing the book. What led you to write The Healing Circle?
Well, I had the incredible pleasure and honor of being able to work with Tim really since 1999. And we recently finished our 50th retreat. And those first few years were absolutely magical. I mean, we had these weekend retreats, and I just thought the first weekend retreat was amazing. These incredible old souls getting together, the energy, the infusion of love. And I just thought, well, there's a once in a lifetime experience. It never happen again. And yet the next retreat, the same thing happened. We set a good intention. We brought in this kind of loving perspective, and people really shared from the heart, and incredible transformation from strangers on the Friday night to this incredible feeling of connection and just relaxation and this energized peace on the Sunday afternoon. And it just kept happening year after year. And we thought to ourselves, well, how can we share this with a much wider audience? How can you not deny bringing the kind of the wisdom that people bring from their lives, and the kind of the teaching that, providing myself as an oncologist and Dr. Walker as a psychotherapist and an amazing teacher, like why wouldn't you want to bring this to a much wider audience? So it was really this kind of feeling like, geez, we're onto something incredibly powerful here, and really wanted to offer to a much wider audience.
Where did the original idea come from for these retreats? What led you to start the first one?
Go ahead, Tim.
Sure. Well, Rob and I met and talked. We were working with meditation instruction, and Rob and I had a powerful connection talking about meditation. And then we were both very interested in bringing kind of a psychological and mindfulness and psycho-spiritual education to people with cancer. So we just started brainstorming, and we came up with the idea of the weekend retreat that was something that was doable for people. And so we did our first one in 1999, and we spent about a couple of months just planning it and thinking it through. And a lot of it is based on mindfulness-based stress reduction, and also on a kind of a weekend retreat model that I've been involved with for many, many years. So it was a combination of a lot of different things coming together, and Rob's great teaching around the medical system and cancer and how to prevent recurrence of cancer and so forth. So we just brought it all together, and really we wanted it to be a journey where people learn from each other. Yeah. So the idea of people being in a circle and being in the smaller groups and talking to each other, but that being framed in a kind of mindfulness that helps people to really connect with their heart, and so that their conversations are kind of highlighted.
The other thing I would just say is I think it was actually destiny. I don't know if people believe in this idea, but why did I become interested in support groups? I don't think I had control over that part of the journey, nor do, I just think the stars were aligned that I was going to meet Tim. And, right from the very first time that I saw one of his posters, I knew deep within my psyche I wanted to work with him. I can't explain that. But there was this incredible synergy when we got together, and it's just been magical ever since. And so it's one of the things I'm incredibly grateful for within my own lifetime, is to be able to work with Tim and to learn from Tim. So, and then you're bringing kind of a scientific perspective from my side with Tim's incredible knowledge, and, being able to tap into the perspectives of many different religious and spiritual teachings. So it's been an incredible marriage that I think was just destined to happen one way or the other.
Now it's, I'm so impressed by the programs you've put together, the books. I mean, they're just amazing. And one of the things that I really actually rather enjoy is, or I find interesting, is that to get to this, to get to a place of peace, some mindfulness, you actually have to embrace the dark, don't you?
Yeah. And I mean, Tim can speak to this much more, but I like to talk. So, so interesting. The very first exercise on Friday evening is to ask people to talk about what's been most difficult in their cancer journey. You know, really going into the dark, difficult stuff, the stuff that they're really struggling with. And I really think it's extremely important that we go there, because that's really the ground in which the great healing can happen. And really the perspective as well is, if we can embrace our fears, including the fear of death, and it actually liberates an incredible amount of energy that can empower us and to guide us to seeing the fact that life is very sacred as well. So the flip of actually going into the hard stuff is stretching your heart at that level, so you can experience, you know, peace and joy and gratitude. So over to you, Tim.
Yeah, well, I think one of the major themes is that through the darkness, we find the light. And that it's really because so often our normal kind of way is to avoid anything that's painful. And if we find that we actually pay attention and are mindful of things that are painful and difficult and emotional turmoil, that it's actually workable. We can work with that energy that we find difficult. And in the context of a group and with support and the support of meditation practice and loving kindness towards ourselves and towards others, and developing that kind of circle of compassion, then people find that they can face what they didn't want to face when they're on their own or with their family. And by bringing that out, it's sort of like it opens up space for people to share. And it really is a tremendous kind of transformation through the weekend of going right into the darkness and the heavy duty, difficult stuff. And by the Sunday afternoon, people are just smiling and joking and laughing. And, you know, there's a lot of warmth and love in the room.
Well, the darkness is where you learn, isn't it?
Yes.
I guess the other thing I would add to that is, and what I find miraculous actually, is that I think that there is a natural innate force within us that wants us to grow and to heal and to let go of our pain and difficulty in some sense. And it's simply by approaching that with this kind of loving sense and almost like confidence that if we actually go there, the miracle will happen. We will gain the insight. We will have the perspective that actually takes us to the next level on our journey. So it's actually critical and extremely helpful to go and to be with the most difficult stuff, to actually embrace it and not to fight it off, and just to be there. And that is healing by itself.
Really, and that's what we're there for, is just to facilitate, because that's the difficult thing for people to do. And when we don't go towards the difficult, dark places, then they get sort of locked in pockets in our psyche, and that creates more turmoil and more problems. And so by avoiding our pain and suffering, it actually gets worse. So our job is just to facilitate an environment where people feel safe to go actually and touch the difficult places. And then they have the resources within. We have this heart of wisdom and compassion that we can bring to that pain and suffering. And as a group, as a community, it begins to lighten up, and people do have the resources to cope and overcome.
Do you think that by learning, once you learn to navigate and transcend difficulties like this, that this is a learnable, repeatable skill?
Yeah, well, I think the brain science is showing that, right? I think the more that we practice bringing ourselves to that which is difficult and having confidence that we have the inner resources to cope, and you do it over and over, even on a daily basis, just for 10, 15 minutes, there's a quality of gaining strength and capacity. And I've been working with a system of working with trauma that uses a very similar approach of developing a deep resilience and a sense of strength of mind. And then from that, you can take little bits of trauma and process them. And with your ability to find a place that's peaceful and a sense of well-being, then you can take little bites out of your trauma and your pain.
And I want to say as well, so our book is called The Healing Circle, but the subtitle is Integrating Science, Wisdom, and Compassion in Reclaiming Wholeness on the Cancer Journey. Well, what does this reclaiming wholeness mean? Well, part of it, you can think of it from a kind of spiritual perspective, but there's a kind of scientific correlate that I'll get into as well. It's the idea that we can actually hold our lives with a sense of compassion, be kind of putting our arms around our lives, and still be able to experience the difficulties, aggravations, the stresses, etc. But from that kind of place of peace, to be both psychologically suffering and experience incredible peace and joy at the same time. And from a scientific, and I believe that's actually just a truth into our human nature. We have both those kind of elements of our human being, I guess. But what Tim's also talking about is how that kind of, from a scientific perspective, that when you get yourself into your frontal lobe with mindfulness, with meta-awareness, that you can actually watch what's happening kind of psychologically, emotionally. You're actually putting down new wiring there. You're actually putting your frontal lobe into the kind of pain pathways within the brain. And your point, Pat, is that as you practice that, you get better and better and better of holding this and not getting pulled away into the story and the suffering, et cetera, that you can actually practice getting to that kind of frame of mind. And I just want to add one more thing to the idea, is kind of reflecting on the books. And as you said, half the book is stories of people who've attended the retreats, and half of it is the kind of the teachings, the body, mind, spirit teachings of what we actually teach on the weekend retreats. But I'm reflecting on the stories of the people that are on the retreats, and it actually takes work. In order to heal, you actually have to do some work, including setting your intention in the morning, including practicing relaxation technique, including these healing techniques that you can use and learn. And as you actually work with the truth of your own psyche, your own physical body, the practice actually creates the circuitry within the brain that allows for healing perspectives to come through.
Now, I think that's a really important point. It's not free. You do have to put effort in.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think the stories really illustrate that. The journey, it's like when you go on a really tough journey and you have to climb the mountain, and then you go down the valley, and you have to climb up another mountain, go on a pass. It's that quality of people are willing with some kind of determination to face their difficulties and keep going. And I think that's, what we're trying to share with people. And when we interviewed many, many people and got their stories, we began to kind of sift through and find certain themes that were very similar with a lot of people. And one of those is that people had been giving and giving and giving to everyone else, and they hadn't been really looking after themselves. So one of the main themes is learning to come back to self-compassion and loving kindness towards oneself. And so that's a major theme in many of the stories, that people learn to gradually, and it doesn't mean that you don't care for others and that you're not still, the mama who's helping everyone, but there's a quality of, at least you're taking care of yourself first, and then you have the resources to be available to others.
That's interesting. Are there any other themes that come to mind that are people seem to have in common?
Can I just add to Tim's comment as well? Is so I also thought about what have we learned since writing this book a few years ago. And so one of the major ideas is the practice of self-compassion is the most effective way of actually making a change. And so we have like a quarter of the book is around kind of reframing how our thoughts influence our emotion and so on. But the science has come out subsequent to us publishing the book to say that loving voice, that kind and rational voice within our mind that kind of helps guide us on our journey, if we can listen to that kind of very self-compassionate voice and treat ourselves as we treat a very, very good friend or even our loved ones, that it actually allows us to make those changes more effectively. So again, it's this idea of practicing the self-compassion and the techniques from a self-compassionate perspective.
Yeah, and it's also from the science that the sympathetic nervous system, and when we're in the kind of fight or flight of the animal brain, we get very narrowly focused, and we become focused on how bad things are. And, you know, as they say, we become like Velcro for the negative, and we just focus on if there's maybe a billion things that are good in our life, but we have cancer, and then we focus on that one thing that's painful. And the idea with training our minds is that we can begin to open up and broaden our focus and notice that actually from day to day, my life is really pretty good right now, and I have cancer, you know? So there's an ability to actually see the bigger picture and have some kind of a more global perspective on one's life. And that's really what reframing helps us to do, moment to moment.
So how have these weekend retreats evolved, both with the science and with technology over time?
Remarkably, the actual techniques that we're teaching, very, very similar. And so we, perhaps Tim and I, have gotten a little bit better at kind of pointing people towards, you know, the technique itself, but, you know, it is the human experience. And I think for me, it's the takeaway. So I'm very pragmatic. You have this human body. How does this human body work? And what are the kind of the scientific ways that you can empower your body so you'll have more strength, you'll change the soup in which the cancer cells grow, you know, you'll be happier physically. And then the second thing is that we're a product of evolution. So how does this kind of human mind work? The kind of brainstem, fight or flight, the kind of limbic and mammalian emotional system, the kind of reward system. And then you have that kind of very wise part of your brain. So how do you ride that horse? How do you, you know, use the kind of machinery that you've been given in order to tap into the bigger picture, which for me, I would call spiritual, saying, how can I bring those greatest principles, the things that are most important to me, into this world? How can I manifest? Well, I need my body, I need my psyche, I need my mind to be able to do that. And so that, I mean, that's the other thing why I'm kind of proud of this in some sense, is that these teachings are classic, right? This is a human journey. We go from being scared of our own death, to having to be able to work with that, transcend that, embrace that, and manifest that sense of spirit because we've gone through it. Because the teaching is so classic and based on like good science and that kind of broader perspective, the technique itself hasn't changed. Going from, you know, Friday evening, the kind of the anxiety and angst of having to chat with strangers, through, you know, stress reduction, through reframing thoughts, to actually going to the deepest fears on Sunday morning, to yoga and qigong and reframing, and then allowing that kind of closing circle. The technique and the trajectory of the weekends has been remarkable in its consistency. Tim?
Yeah, that's true. It is interesting though how we, right off the bat, Rob was inspired back in 2000 for us to do webinars and so forth, but the technology wasn't quite there, and then now it's more and more that is happening. So that's been something that we have been able to. But early on too, I think there was a big growing point for us when we started videotaping a lot. It's a very interesting learning experience to see how people actually, people found being videotaped and being interviewed with taping, that it was actually a healing experience for them. It was like an interview that they could really open up their heart and share their life and talk with the interviewer. And so we found that, you know, contrary to what a lot of people would think, that their confidentiality would be their most important thing, they actually wanted to share their journey with other people. And in doing so, they felt that that was very healing. So a lot of the people, all the people in our book and the stories, there were detailed interviews, and they all wanted their names to be used. So it's actual, you know, real people with real names.
I've had the pleasure of actually meeting some of those people over the years.
Great.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, we've got you now.
You have a story about that?
Unfortunately, I'm in the park office, so when people come in and they use their own devices, it interrupts the stream. So
Right.
There's no one here now, so I'll be okay for a while, but I'll maybe make a gesture like this if it's time to mute me. One of the things I wanted to reflect on for myself was when I was undergoing treatment, you had and this is described in my book, The Cancer Olympics, so talking about when I was absorbing one of your webinars online. And in that instance, one of the, some of the characters in the book, or not characters, some of the people in the book were online, came online and were with you in Skype. And for me, how, even through remote technology, how extremely therapeutic that was to see those people, because I knew the book had been written years before. Many had been given very dire prognoses, were obviously alive, and one that stands out in my mind, several stand out in my mind. But one of them is Jeff.
Yes.
And Jeff, if you recall, he was tired when he was doing the Skype interview with you because he just brought his third baby home from the hospital, he who had been told that he would never have children.
Yeah.
So
I think
that was amazing. But also for me, I wanted to say there was another person who was a doctor. She had stage 3 breast cancer. She had just returned to work, and she was extremely inspiring to me, because she was saying how she had made the decision to return to work, as that was a message she was sending to herself, saying, I am going to live.
Yes.
And she had made that decision maybe 5-6 years before, and there she was in her, I believe she was home and had her little kids in the background and so on. But how inspirational it was at the point of I think I was facing I couldn't finish the webinar because I had another surgery coming up, but I was riveted to seeing the people that you described in the book.
Yeah, and I guess I have two reflections on that. So Karen is now 11 years out from her diagnosis, and she's doing amazingly well. So I just got an email from her a few days ago, and Jeff is still running Young Adult Cancer Canada. And I think if you make it to the book, you have a much higher chance of doing fantastically well. I think honestly, and then there's Andrew in chapter 5. I think he's actually a living miracle as well. I mean, he had a very bad brain tumor, and he's still, still so full of life. And there's just so many others that as I kind of browse through the book, saying, geez, that person's doing well. And Julie's now a cancer researcher, International Julie Day, and Julie and Randy. It's just amazing people there. And so that also speaks to, the amazing cancer survivors. But I just want to reflect on your insight of, it's so good to see that person directly. And the same thing actually happens within the week retreat itself. People, when they're diagnosed with cancer, oftentimes feel really isolated, alone, just totally disconnected from the world. And to have people come in and actually just tell their truth and to listen, I think that's an incredible therapy just in and of itself. It's just that connection. Yeah. So yeah, it makes sense. It's just, we're so wired to connect with people and to care for people and not to feel isolated. And I think that's just therapy in itself, is that willingness to be authentic and to have your story listened to.
I think it's actually really powerful therapy, because I think in this society, I'll say in North America at least, we've become so self-absorbed and fragmented in many cases that neighbors don't necessarily know each other or talk to each other or support each other. We don't have those traditional social systems that have been so important over time. And I think you offer people an opportunity to connect in a way that is not present in their daily lives anymore.
Yeah. And so often we've had that. It's I don't know, I can kind of quote the comment exactly, but it's as if they have, through the experience of the weekend retreat, come to this feeling of connection, deep human connection that they would never have experienced in their whole life to that point. So it's really like, I didn't recognize that was possible, that I could feel so connected with so many strangers all at once, and the kind of the depth of connection and love. And I mean, I think I'm a weekend retreat addict. Let's just be clear here, is that going away from the weekend retreats, I feel like I've been infused by this incredible love from so many strangers all at once.
Mhm. And Robin, I think your comments are very good in terms of there's something that's transmitted. It's like all of the teachings that we're giving, somehow it's embodied in a person and then it's transmitted directly person to person.
Yeah.
When a person can say, I have survived this and I went through this journey, and somehow there's a resonance that somebody else picks up, and it gives them courage, it gives them strength, it gives them feeling that I can do this too.
Yeah. And I say in the weekend retreats, I say to people, when you recognize that you're listening to this inspirational character, you're seeing great strength or great courage, you're seeing it because it's actually within you, right? There's there's the resonance that you kind of recognize your own strength, your own beauty, your own, brilliance in some sense. And that's why it's wonderful to be in a group of so many people, because you're going to resonate with the great spirits that are there.
And you know what's so powerful? You're not resonating with your mind, you're resonating with your heart.
Yes.
Yeah.
Deep heart level.
Connected.
I remember being inspired by the book by some of the simple decisions of the endurance of the people in it. For example, there's a story in there about a woman who, I believe, having a stem cell transplant, and she was describing taking the next breath, and then the next breath, and then the next breath. And I many, many times used that when I was going through treatment myself.
Yeah, there's also a story of a gentleman, I don't recall his name, and he talks about how this has just been terrible. It's taken away his identity. I think he was a software executive or something, and his family's suffering from this, and there's a lot of discord. And I found I just found the fact that people were talking about such imperfect situations, to be so refreshing, because everybody in this world thinks everything's supposed to be perfect and glossy and wonderful all the time. And if you don't meet those standards, they shun you or reject you. And that's nuts, because nobody really lives a perfect life.
Yes. Yeah. And I think to me, that's the power of story, because we actually recognize the authentic struggle, the rawness, the vulnerability that we all suffer. And yet, putting on this mask, and, the process is to take off the mask. That's really the process of healing in some sense. And so that's why I think, the book is powerful, because the stories are real, the words are real. It's like people that have lived it, and you can also see the transformations. I'm thinking about Jackie. She's just such a lovely, amazing, beautiful woman. But she was describing when she first got diagnosed, she was upset because who's going to run the world now that I've got a cancer diagnosis? She was kind of that super mama phase, and you see the transformation. And that kind of letting go and releasing into the spiritual, it's just so beautiful. It's just that kind of image of allowing herself just to be and allow the wind to take her whichever way the wind's going to take her. It's just, so to see the transformation, to know that that's possible, from going from, yes, deeply hurt, and also releasing into spirit.
Robin had a question earlier that I want to be sure we bring up. She mentioned, what question would you like to be asked about this book?
Oh, geez. Well, I guess the question that I kind of came to me was, what have we learned since writing the book? And my reflection is that it's so much easier to talk about the kind of reality of this because of the brain science recently. So it's really been fun. I mean, because people know intuitively, they know in their gut that there's a spirit, mind, body connection. And I've been talking about this for 25 plus years now. But in those first 10 plus years, it was hard to talk about because I didn't have the kind of the science. But actually, the science is showing that we have a powerful influence on our body. And so, I mean, if I had to re-edit the book, it would be, how do you include the kind of reality? And then there's the kind of science around consciousness and this kind of sense of wholeness and the sense of spirituality. And so it's kind of, for me, it's an exciting time to say, there's a bigger picture here, and we're not just being woo-woo, spiritual guys. There is actually a way to look at this, and that people can resonate, identify, and grow from. So I'm not sure if I answered the question, but that's what I mean. That's the question I would want to be asked. So around tapping into spirit and how that's possible.
Robin, any other thoughts on that?
I have another question. You would add those things to the book then, were you to write the book today?
I know, Tim, what do you think? Would you change the book?
Yeah, well, I think that we could add, I think there's a lot of good in there already.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has not changed that much. But I think there is this science in the brain science about, it's more convincing for people about why to practice meditation, and the fact that it actually does change your neurology, and there's this self-directed neuroplasticity. So those kind of terms and that science is out there, and it helps people give them confidence in their practice. And I think that's important. Yeah.
But the fact is, I wouldn't change the book. I think that's the takeaway. The stories are just so real. It is the common human experience. We say that you go from a kind of narrow focused of my life, my journey, my pain. This is where I'm at. To read the stories. Say, oh, I resonate with that. I resonate with that one. I resonate with that. It's, oh, this is common. This is the story. This is the pain. This is the journey. So it's no longer held so personally. And there's almost a sense of relief or release, even as we kind of release into life, to say this is the norm. This is expected, and it's okay to feel frustrated. It's okay to feel upset. It's okay to feel angry, and we're not teaching that those difficult emotions are going to go away. You're just going to practice these healing techniques and you're going to be happy. It's more like being able to embrace the whole reality, the full catastrophe of your life, with a sense of joy and peace, in addition to the difficult stuff.
Well, on that note, I think this is just an amazing book. And for everybody facing a cancer experience, this is one of the books I'd recommend. It's just wonderful. Robin, what do we have coming up next month? She may have lost her connection.
Can you hear?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, what do we have coming up next month? Maybe she can't. I think we have a fault in our stars, the book and or movie. So if you're not into reading the book, you can cheat and watch the movie. It is perfectly A-okay. And it's an interesting story. And I hope it'll resonate with some people in the young adult cancer community as well, because it does feature teenagers going through this very life-altering experience.
What's it called again, Pat?
The Fault in Our Stars.
The Fault in Our Stars.
Is it The Fault or A Fault?
No, it's The Fault in Our Stars.
The Fault in Our Stars.
Yeah. It's about a book about a teenage girl who gets a cancer diagnosis, and just incredible connection and journey that she goes on. So.
Thank you both so much for being here today to talk about your book. It is always such a delight to get together with both of you. Robin, thank you for taking time out of your holiday. And we'll all get together, or we'll be having Cancer Book Club at least, again next month. Thank you all.